Okay, welcome back to DecryptedTech. Today we're taking a look at the X79-UP4. Now this is going to be revision 1.1 as we're going to be testing this board with both the Sandy Bridge 3960X and the Ivy Bridge E4960X to get a direct comparison on a single board so we can see exactly how much of a performance difference you're going to get between the Sandy Bridge E-class processor and an Ivy Bridge E-class processor. We're also going to be dropping in some Kingston Beast memory. We're going to have 64 gigs of 2300 megahertz, or excuse me, 2133 megahertz Kingston memory. We're really going to put this board through its paces, see exactly how far we can overclock it, what the performance deltas are, and give you a really nice overview on a single common platform to show you what you get between these two processors. There's a lot of information about them and a lot of different opinions, so we're going to try and narrow that in with some synthetic performance tests as well as some real-world performance examples, including Lightwave, and we're going to bring in some other new tests, including Lightwave 11, as well as potentially bringing in a couple of other rendering programs that are really heavily dependent upon the CPU, just to give you a good idea of what the performance is between these two, as well as show you just how well this Gigabyte board performs with both of the CPUs. Alright, again, taking a look at the front of the box, you have your typical marketing stuff, ultra durable 5, that's where we're at, high current capability, that's going to give you that overclocking. This is designed for Intel CPUs, that are overclocked, unlocked performance. It's specifically intended for water-cooled systems, which is what we're going to be running. We're going to be running on a consumer-grade water-cooled system. That's Cooler Master's Iceberg 240. Of course, you have your 3D power, 3D BIOS, everything it's set for, Windows 8 ready, some of the typical marketing stuff. On the back, we get into a little bit more detail about the marketing. They're ultra cool, ultra efficient, ultra performance. They have their own it's called the IOR that they put in here, and this is supposed to give you better performance based on lower temperatures of your components, and we'll get into component selection once we look at the board itself. Of course, you have the three-way digital power engine, you have digital memory, digital CPU, all of that set up, so you can just get a good look on this. And if you want to take a closer look at some of these pictures, we have them in the written review, which you can click on the link right below this video, and you'll be able to see that. Give it a little bit more information here. We don't want to bore you with too much of the box, so we're going to move straight into taking a look at what the board has to offer. Okay, before we take a look at the actual physical components of the board, let's look at what's provided inside the box. You have a 3-way SLI bridge, a 4-way SLI bridge for those of you that want to use that. You have a standard SLI bridge, and then you have a crossfire bridge. You also, Gigabyte throws in 4 SATA cables, an I/O shield with a nice padded back. They kind of borrowed that from other companies that have used that in the past, namely ASUS, so it's nice to see that becoming more of a common trend. You have your drivers and utilities DVD, the usual manual, a multilingual kind of quick start guide, and then there's a couple of stickers that are inside the box. If that's the kind of thing you're into, you can throw those on your case, or throw them in the trash, whichever you prefer. Now we'll pull out the board and we'll take a look at it and the component selection, as well as kind of the design philosophy behind it. Okay, so here we have the board. As with most modern motherboards, it is an ATX form factor. It's going to be your standard ATX, and it's going to be based on the same flow. Memory, CPU are going to be at the top. Your components and peripherals are going to be located at the bottom. Follows the same, very similar case design. So we'll go ahead and we'll zoom in here and we'll take a look at some of the particulars. Alright, as we zoom in on this area, we're taking a look at the power and memory section. You can see it has your typical 24-pin power supply connector right next to a USB 3.0 connector that's down here along the bottom. That's also becoming very common. You can see a couple of chokes and what appear to be Nichicon capacitors here. These are going to be your a little bit higher end solid capacitors. We'll talk more about that again on the written review that we have. So this is a good setup, and it's really, you can tell it's pretty well built for overclocking. You're going to be able to push these a little bit higher than you can some of your more traditional capacitors that are going to be on there. Again, when you talk about components, a solid capacitor is not the same. There are different levels of quality, as well as different brands that are going to give you more higher amperage rating, higher voltage ratings, things like that. You also have a 3-pin fan header. You can see your primary, or one of your banks of memory. So you have 4 slots over here. You're going to have 4 slots on the other side of the CPU. Looking at the back of the power regulation here for the CPU, you can see it's got a nice cooler that's sitting on top of their Gigabyte's power regulation units. These are IR3550 Powell R stage. Now, according to Gigabyte, these are a cleaner design. They're better than your traditional MOSFETs, so they're going to give you less heat, higher current rating. They're rated at 60 amps, and so it's going to give you a better power flow through the board rather than the traditional components. We'll see how that works when we go ahead and put this to the test and push this and try and overclock our processor, see exactly how high we can get it. You also have another choke. These are now moving into solid chokes. Originally these chokes were just nothing but coils of wire, but by enclosing them, you actually get a little bit better performance. They run cooler and they have less electronic interference with the rest of the components. Single 8-pin auxiliary power connector is right here. It's in kind of a bad position. You are probably going to lose some knuckle skin. Guys, we always recommend just get an extension. A lot of times if you buy an extension, it's going to make your case look cleaner anyway, because you have more room to kind of get that out of the way and fold it behind the board and run it behind the back plane in your case. All right, you can also see our second bank of memory here. This is going to be for the quad channel memory. Again, we will be running 64 gigs of memory in hours. This board is capable of running quite a bit, so it's nice, and that's one of the benefits of working with a 2011 processor. Here you see the socket. It's a clean look. It's kind of a smoke instead of that solid aluminum. You have your different your mount points here for your cooler. You have a CPU fan that's right over here by the memory. Again, you have additional chokes and some capacitors. You can see the chokes right here for your power regulation for the CPU. So it's a pretty clean power design, and it looks like it's a nice layout, including the heatsink. Looks pretty well put together. One of the only concerns we would have is, again, if you're water cooling, you're not going to have a whole lot of airflow across this. So this may get a little warmer. You're going to want to make sure that your case has some good airflow, and that's why we've moved to the testing benches that we have, which we'll talk more about in our the written review. Again, that link is right here below the video. So just go ahead and click on that, and that'll give you a little bit more information. So we're going to move down to the bottom half of the board now, and we're going to take a look at our components. As you can see, you do have 4 PCIe slots. Not all of these are going to be X16. You're going to have some that are going to be X16, some that are going to be X8. Quickest and easiest way to tell that is to flip the board over. So as you can see, you have 2 that are X16 and you have 2 that are X8. And that's going to be the number of pins that are there. The slots themselves are X16 mechanical. That means they'll mechanically fit an X16 card, but they're only going to handle X8 as far as PCIe is concerned. So there's that setup. As always, Gigabyte does give you a PCI slot, PCI 2.1 I believe, compatible. So you can see where you've got some of your audio components over here on the side. Looking down at the bottom, you have your front audio. You have a COM A, so you can actually put a COM port in here, another fan, a trusted platform module, and 2 more USB headers, an additional USB header for the front. You have 2 SATA ports that are down here, and of course you have your front panel headers and a systems fan right there. So, and now let's take a look at the MCP. The MCP is the media control processor. This is what traditionally would have been the south bridge, but now since everything's moved onto the CPU with Intel processors, a lot of those additional components have moved down here. You'll still hear people could refer to it as the south bridge, but it's the main processor chip for the board. This is where your X79 chipset is. Gigabyte has gone with a fairly nice heatsink. They've allowed it to spread, and if we tilt it here, you can see that this extension right here actually doesn't mount onto the board. It doesn't come down enough, so it's allowing that to flow out so that air can get underneath it and help cool the actual chipset and give you a little bit better performance and the ability to push it a little bit more. Okay, and talking about the actual SATA ports that are on here, you actually have several different kinds that are running. You have 2 SATA 6, which are going to be your so actually SATA 6 gigabit or SATA 3.0. That's going to be the 2 white ones here. These are running off of the X79 chipset. You have 4 SATA 2 or 3 gigabits per second. Those are also running off the X79. Then you have 4 SATA 3 or 6 gigabit ports here that are running off of a Marvell 88 SE9172 chip. That's a third-party chipset that's going to be put on the board to give you some extra SATA 3 ports. Again, you have 2 that are meant for the front or for regular usage, and then the 2 back here, they're actually listed as F-panel ports, so meaning if you have an eSAT or something like that, you can run that to there, although they can be used for internal drives and run off of that. It's going to require a third-party driver. So if you have your main boot drive here, when you're loading up Windows, unless it's Windows 8, which should have a driver for this, you're probably going to need to install a driver to make sure that your boot drive is seen during the entire installation. And that's something you'll have to look into depending on which operating system you want to run. So that covers the majority of the items that are on the board itself here. And we're going to go ahead and flip it around and take a look at the back. This is your I/O. You have quite a few USB 2.0. You have two USB 3. You have a couple of eSATA ports. You have the coaxial and optical SPDIF. That's going to be your digital audio out. And then of course your standard 8.1 channel audio that's here. And as what's becoming common on your overclocking board is you have a dual, it's a combo PS2 port. It'll run either keyboard or mouse. So you can plug that in to make sure that you can still get into your BIOS. Some boards, when they're overclocked, the USB doesn't work or doesn't initialize fast enough, so you have a little bit of a hard time getting into the BIOS. So that covers everything about the layout of the board. Again, this is looks to be an overclocking board. They are going with the dual UEFI BIOS. So you have two of those. The BIOSes are backed up to each other, so you can run one or the other. You have your clear CMOS up here if you need to actually clear that. And like we said, it's a good board. We're going to go ahead and get it up on the bench, drop in our 3960 first, and see just what kind of performance we can get out of it. As always, if you like this video, be sure to click on the like button. Make sure to subscribe to us to stay up to date with the news and reviews we have for you. And be sure to share this with your friends. Thank you.